Yeah, I'm with Stephen Volk. Thank you for inviting me, Stephen.
That's all right. Glad to talk to you.
Just to chat a little bit about your work and obviously the new film that will be coming out on the 26th of this month, and that's The Awakening.
Yeah,
But I'd like to talk about some of your other work as well beforehand.
sure.
Obviously, Afterlife, that's something
Right, yeah,
that a lot of people know, series on BBC.
yeah.
What actually got you started with Afterlife?
I've always been really interested in the idea of a medium as a regular character in a TV series. There
Sure.
are certain things that appeal to one in the form of TV. You know, the idea of a medium investigating different stories of the week, kind of
Yeah.
cases of the week, as they say in America.
Yeah.
You know, that's been part of the format of TV since TV began, from Dixon to Doc Green. It's always kind of stories of the week, that kind of thing, with detectives. And I always thought, well, not always, but I mean, for many years, thought that the equivalent of that in a supernatural series would be ideally a medium, you know. And the additional good thing about that is all the things that really appeal to me about the medium as a dramatic character, which is character in the middle of a drama that's kind of disbelieved by everyone else. You know, they know the truth, but everyone else thinks they're balmy.
Yeah.
You know, so from that, the idea of a kind of troubled medium. I always describe Afterlife as the story of a troubled medium and even more troubled psychologist who's writing about her. You know,
I thought it was quite. I mean, you know, the whole idea of the medium being like the detective was unique. I think.
and unfortunately, it wasn't quite unique because by the time it went on TV, of course, there was the American series called Medium.
Medium, yeah.
Which also had an Alison, strangely enough, a synchronicity. But of course, when I wrote it, I'll tell you when I wrote it, was before The Sixth Sense came out. Because I remember, which was in the late 90s, wasn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
And I wrote the first episode for not the company that eventually made it, a different company. Such is the way that television works. But they were very inactive in pushing it with ITV at the time. They didn't want to put it forward to ITV, didn't think the time was ready, the climate was ready for ITV to commit to a supernatural series. And then The Sixth Sense came out. So I was on the phone saying, look, there's people queuing around the block to watch The Sixth Sense, and we've got Afterlife about this medium. You know, I see dead people, almost exactly the same line as in my show. Surely it must be the right time to pitch it to them. But even so, they were still reluctant. So it was virtually another 6, 7, 8 years before, you know, television moves very slowly in terms of fashion. So, you know, in a different company, they were keen enough to push it with ITV, and it finally got off the ground.
Because I think with Andrew Lincoln that played Dr. Robert Bridge.
Well, it was influenced by quite a few people that I've met. I've read a lot of books about parapsychology and met people like Kieran O'Keefe and Richard Wiseman. And I suppose a little tweak, a little peppering of Derren Brown's kind of skepticism. So all that kind of filtered into the character. But mainly it was my own skepticism informing that character. I always say that both Alison and Robert are two sides of me. There's Robert, who is a writer. He's very analytical. He doesn't believe in anything. He actually sits down, and his way of dealing with the world is to analyse things and to come up with the answers. And Alison, on the other hand, is the other side of me, who gets scared of bumps in the night, imagines things, has kind of wild imagination, you might say, and are kind of scared of her imagination. You know,
it was quite an interesting ending as well, wasn't it? I mean, it kind of like all turned round at the end.
The very end of the second series?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, that's a very interesting thing because, like you, Richard, I'm very sceptical as a person, and being a writer of ghost stories, people find it jaw-droppingly surprising when I say I don't believe in any of it. And actually, most people I know that write ghost stories, supernatural stories, horror stories are as sceptical as me. But the thing is, when you're writing a story, the story itself, especially in the case of Afterlife, it does have a life of its own after a while, and you can't proselytize or kind of preach in a drama. Somehow the drama starts to dictate to you about what it wants to say. So even though I privately think that, you know, most mediums are possibly deluded or self-deluded,
sure.
Or some degree of fakery is involved or misapprehension, the story I was telling emotionally about those two characters didn't want to push in that direction. It didn't want to push in the direction of Robert coming to the conclusion, for instance, of that Alison was completely mad and she needed to be in a nut house and that's where she'd end up. The story was about the change in Robert. So the change in Robert was the real journey that it ended up going on. And you have to have faith that the story is telling you the right thing in a way.
I think that's the thing with writing, because I know when I've done writing myself, is I found, like you say, that the story goes completely with the characters, what you put on the situations, and before you know it, the ending's worked itself out.
That's right. Yeah.
I think what's good about with the afterlife as well, I think it's very important, is to care about the characters in any kind of fiction.
Yeah.
And I certainly think that was
Okay.
it. Going the other series that you were famous for is Ghostwatch. Do you want to tell me a little bit about that? Because
well, you say it wasn't a series; it was a one-off.
A one-off, wasn't it? Yeah.
But it actually did start as a series. I went into the BBC in the late '80s, believe it or not, to try and pitch a supernatural drama series. So in a way, it was stylistically more like Afterlife in a way.
Yeah.
But the climate wasn't right to get a series of 6 one-hour dramas off the ground. So the producer said to me, "Could we just do one 90-minute single drama?"
Yeah.
And what happened in my format, which was called Ghostwatch right from the beginning, was that the final episode was a live broadcast from a haunted house. So I said, and it kind of reflected the stories that led up to that kind of thing. But it was a conventional drama series in the way it was filmed and that kind of thing. That was the proposal. But I said, what if we did just episode 6 and we did it as if it's live, And she went, do you think we can do that? And I said, well, let's aim high and try and pull it off. I must admit then I was fairly, I would say 50-50 about whether this was ever going to happen.
Okay.
But as a kind of proposition to try and pull off something really different, we just wanted to kind of go for it. So then it was a case of, in terms of writing it, it was very unlike writing a conventional screenplay, because in a screenplay usually you do things a completely different way. You structure it in a way that there's a kind of bargain when you go to the cinema that, okay, especially for a scary movie, you're making a kind of implicit promise to the audience that you're going to deliver certain things. In a way, the thing about Ghostwatch was there wasn't that compact with the audience going to pay their $5, go and sit in the cinema seat and be scared. Ghostwatch was piped into your home where you already feel safe. That was the delicious thing for me about a horror writer, because you don't have to make the audience feel safe and then undermine it, because they're already safe because they're sitting at home. But I couldn't write it like a conventional drama screenplay, because that would have signaled to the audience that it wasn't real.
Yeah.
What I had to do is write it in the way that you'd write something like Michael Burke's 999 or Hospital Watch, which had Sarah Green in it, or those kind of live stroke outside broadcast or kind of thing. I ended up watching things like Wogan, the Terry Wogan show, where he would interview people, just to get a kind of the vibe of how interviews were conducted, how you introduce experts, just all the kind of tropes, if you like, of live TV, because those are the things I had to tell the story in, not like a horror film, but like an OB live drama interview.
Do you think I mean, if you had brought it out now, I guess it would have worked a lot better than it would have at that particular time, possibly.
Well, I think people say, would you do it again, or would you do it now? I think the thing is, you wouldn't do it now, because the world has moved on. I mean, if you did it now, you would just do it as a reality TV show. You wouldn't do it as a fake drama.
Sure.
You just wouldn't go to the effort of that. You'd actually do it what they do now, which is they have, they put the Happy Mondays in a haunted house, or the cast of Coronation Street gets scared somewhere. That's the kind of legacy of Ghostwatch in a funny kind of way, are these kind of reality shows that do a kind of live spin on it. So I think I'm really glad that we did it in 1992, because it was the kind of cusp of reality TV starting, with the, like I said, Michael Burke Rescue 999. What they would do is they'd have interviews with the people, got his head stuck under a bomb or something, and then they'd have an actor enacting it, and they'd have music, so they'd dramatize it, have an interview, that kind of thing. So hang on, is this a documentary? Is it a drama? What is it? And it was a time in the early 90s where these rules were being broken all over the place. There was, you'd see shows like Hill Street Blues or something like that with a handheld camera. Or you'd see something like, the real pivotal point was when the producers saw coverage of the first Gulf War, the kind of I don't know. I think NBC covered it,
Yeah.
and they had music over the bombing of Baghdad. You know,
I can remember
and,
that. Yeah.
It was quite a shock because it was almost like a drama
It
convention
was at the
on the
time.
news. You know,
Yeah.
so all these things were kind of in the air. So that's why I think the producer's eyes lit up at the thought of doing something that was a kind of fake documentary.